Hello then, this is Dr. Jimmy, and this will be my 15th video for the history of Halloween Horror Nights 19, ripped from the silver screen. And in more recent videos, I have begun talking about the original houses of the event, and particularly the first original house, Leave It To Cleaver. I started discussing it in the preceding video, part 14, and I left off talking about the backstory of the house, how the grandfather of a Samuel Meats in the interesting little town of Cary, Ohio, had founded a butcher shop and had done quite well, selling some delightful meat products in this nifty little town of Cary, Ohio, yes. But then during the Depression, economic disaster struck. For various reasons, the meat supply dwindled and the prices became too high. They were struggling and they needed to find a way to keep the business alive. And so Mr. Meats at that point, probably the second generation of Meats, thus would be Samuel Meats' dad, found a way, because there was a large transient population going through the area back and forth, especially people, trying to find work, trying to find a way to survive during the Depression. There were lots of transients, vagrants, migrant workers, but there were also hobos and homeless. Back then they didn't use nice politically correct terms like homeless. They called them tramps and bums and hobos. And they were basically unwanted people. And no one would miss them if they suddenly disappeared. Oh, it was a modest proposal. It was a very intriguing conclusion, a way of solving the dilemma of there seems to be a wild beast lurking on my shoulders. That could be painful. It's got pointy claws. A wild beast. Anyway, she sleeps up there just like that. I think she owns the place. She does. But getting back to it, the idea, of course, is that here's a ready supply of meat. And it's free. Yes, a sort of diabolical switch went off in the mind of the elder Meats, and he said, yes, 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 of course. And no one will ever know, because no one will miss these people. And so he got some local Cary people who had, for whatever reason, they needed the money and they had less scruples. They grabbed a bunch of tramps and hobos and vagrants and took them back to the meat processing plant. Hey, don't chew on the damn wires on the router. Damn cat. You're going to mess up the whole computer. Don't stop it. Bob's being naughty. Anyway. No! Excuse me. The cat's about to unplug everything. Get out of there. Get out of there, you naughty kitty. What? What? The screen suddenly goes black. It's because Bob just chewed through everything and it destroyed the whole thing and electrocuted herself and burned the house down. You naughty cat! Don't do that. Don't do that. Oh, I'm going to get you. She's going to bite me now. All right, so try to control the Bob. So basically they rounded up the victims, like this cat. They rounded up the victims and took them to the meat processing plant behind the butcher shop. They built it up and they got a nice new source of delectable meat products. Oh yes, wonderful sausages, friendly sausages, and grind, saw, butcher. Yes, nice hamburger patties, meats and roasts, rump roasts, quite nice, all sorts of lovely things. Wasn't exactly beef, wasn't exactly pork, not quite veal, but damn damn, it's good. And it became very popular. And it sold all over, not just Kerry, but they started to send this out across the country. More and more demand was there. And odds are, if you in that time period, if you went to your local cinema and got a hot dog at the concession stand, the big, juicy, red-hot, plump sausage in your hot dog might have come from Kerry, Ohio, and Meats. And that was the company that Samuel Meats inherited. And he continued in the post-war 1950s boom period to continue to expand his corporation and make even more delicious, neat-to-eat meat products. Cat's being naughty again. So, I have to watch her. I may have to do sometimes distracting cat is best thing. So I may have to do something silly in the middle of this video to distract Bob from behind the... Oh, damn it, she's chewing on wires again. She's doing that deliberately. Sorry about that. I went over there and opened the back door to the pool area and was outside walking around like I was chasing a lizard. And that distracted her immediately. She wanted to see what was up. Silly, silly kitty. Sorry about that interruption. But basically, we have this wonderful butcher shop selling rather dubious meat products. But you know what they always say? You are what you eat. So you go into the house, Meats. Oh, I forgot to mention, a corporate logo was thought up by Samuel Meats. Have you ever been to a Bob's Big Boy? This is a restaurant that's not really here in this part of the country, in Florida, but if you're from some other part of the country, you might have been there, especially in the West, in California. David Lynch loves Bob's Big Boy, by the way, which is kind of appropriate. And I used to go to one in Hawaii where I lived, where I grew up, actually, in Honolulu. Hey, brah! Yeah, that's where I'm from. Doesn't sound like a local boy, but yeah. Anyway, the 808. So I was there, and there was a Bob's Big Boy, and they have their beefy beef and their thick chocolate shakes. Love that stuff. But the corporate symbol, for those of you who are not familiar with Big Boy, if you've seen The Simpsons, and of course you're familiar with Universal, so you know about Lard Lad. Basically, Lard Lad is almost a direct replica of Bob's Big Boy's corporate logo, except he's holding a donut instead of a hamburger. You know, if he had a hamburger in his hand, that would be Bob's Big Boy. And so that was the parody that they used for Meats. They created this happy boy with his little haircut and his big smile, because he loves eating meat. And they call him Meaty Meats. And that was the Bob's Big Boy trademark logo for Meats. And you see his face happy there on a big sign that says Meats. And as you go into the house, the facade in the back is the entranceway to the meat processing plant for Meaty Meats, which you might call the back of the shop. And you go in and it's just like you're going to work, because there's your punch card and your locker rooms, and you encounter almost immediately the employees of Samuel Meats. Very dedicated to providing the best quality meat products, and they bring out their meat hooks and their knives and things and come after you, and their cleavers immediately start coming after you. and you sort of take a tour of the facility. And you know, Sam Meats must have been pretty darn progressive for the 1950s, because gosh darn, there's a childcare room. I mean, it's like childcare. Who was doing childcare in the 50s? It's like women stayed home and took care of the children. You know, it was. This is not the era of liberation. Don't go behind. God damn it! She's trying to do it again. Ugh. This was not the era of women's liberation. This was the era of cat liberation. This was the era of, you know, women staying home and doing all the chores, and they're supposed to like it. So it's kind of amusing that they have this childcare area, but of course that was the real world, though. The real world, you know, they'd have to find something like that. But that wasn't happening in the 1950s yet. But it's amusing because you go into the childcare area and then there's some kids there, the kids of the employees, and they're being trained properly because Sam knows you've got to get them young and teach them, and that way they're carefully taught, you know, and they learn how to be proper good cannibals. And so they're being taught how to slaughter things, you know, like hogs and swine and eventually human beings, where the choice cuts might be. Yum, 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 yum. And then you go into the kitchen areas and some of the areas where people are kept in pins to be used to be slaughtered later. You go into the kitchen and there's lots of blood and guts everywhere. There's some custodial folk working, janitors and and other custodial cleaning people. You encounter them, and you encounter, of course, those that are doing the butchering and the slaughtering with the chainsaws and the cleavers and the cutting and the bleeding and the spurting and the entrails and meat all over the place. And a lovely cameo appearance by Mary Agana, which is quite intriguing. Her head is seen in one of these scenes. Her dismembered head, where someone's chainsawing and stuff, and there's a head there. A head. That's Mary Agana's head. And it's like, how did that get there? It's the 1950s. Well, we know that Mary died in the 1950s when the boxer, I don't remember his name, was not Boris Shuster. He was not the last patient. He missed his appointment. It was a boxer. I forget his name. But he took Gammon or something, I think. But he took Mary, and she went through the mirror. Now, did she go through the mirror physically, breaking the mirror? Was she decapitated when that happened? Because the glass have cut, because it's Bloody Mary when she comes back. It isn't her physically. That's a spectral, ghostly form. That's why she comes through the mirror. It's not a physical being the way. So the body, the corpse, might be still out there somewhere. And perhaps some relative, she's all pissed now, the cat. She's going to get me at some point. All of her relatives or friends or people back in Cary, Ohio, maybe one of them showed up and found some of the mortal remains and took them back to Cary, carry them home, so to speak, in order to give her a proper send-off in the most hasty way whatsoever. Anyway, the head showed up in the meat plant for some reason. That's just my theory. I don't know. They never explained what her head was doing there. But it did further connect Mary Agana to Cary, Ohio. And then, of course, there was a climactic room that was really nice. It's a refrigerating room, and you have these plastic partitions between you and the scare actors, and it's a damn good thing because the scare actor in question has a real actual chainsaw, not the little leaf blower things that they use around the park, the drill team. But this looked like it was real with an actual blade. It was like, holy fuck. But he, of course, there was a divider between you and him, plastic strips and stuff, but you expected to be sawed in half at this point. It was like, holy crap. Now, there's a factor I did not mention so far in describing all of these various employees and children, everybody in the Meaty Meat facility. They're all wearing masks. They're all wearing the Meaty Meat's mask, a sort of, Halloween-type mask, the ones that, have the face and you put them on over the pasteboard masks, in the image of Meaty Meats. that bright, happy logo. And again, that seems to make that point that, you know, underneath the bright, happy surface, underneath this perfect, everyone's happy, there's something sinister going on. And, you know, you don't see their real faces. You don't see what anxiety or anger or horror. You only see the happy face, because that's what Meaty Meats wants you to see. And below the surface, something terrible might be lurking. Yes, even so, no matter what they're doing, everybody's wearing the happy Meaty Meats mask, and except for one major character you're about to meet, because after you go through that refrigeration thing, you've come to the front of the shop. You're actually in the Meaty Meats delicatessen butcher shop itself. And everything is now clean and perfect, and there's display cases of lovely, delightful meat products, and there's blackboards that tell you what's on sale, what's good. You know, try Granny's rump roast, really made from Granny's rump. And all this stuff up here. You know, it's like, remember Mrs. Lovett's, you know, shepherd pie, now with real shepherd. But that's not quite exactly, but similar theme. And you have Samuel Meats himself with his little curlicue mustache and his white apron. Hi, I'm Samuel Meats, and he's there to talk to you. And, well, it's surprising to see you here. I'm surprised you survived the tour, you know, that sort of thing. And he's really happy, and he wants you to sample some of his meaty goods. And he's there. You don't actually get to eat any of that, though. Too bad. But it's quite a delightful thing to end it on this sort of happy note. And they did a perfect job of creating this little deli display with the meats and everything. And then you go out the shop, the little bell tinkles, and you go out the shop, and it's got a storefront like it's actually in the little village of Cary, Ohio, in the little shops. And you think you're home safe, and then all of a sudden around the corner comes Meaty Meats himself, the great big chainsaw wielding icon, the trademark of Meats, the big boy figure. And this one's not wearing a little pasteboard mask. He's got a whole big head, a big gigantic Meaty Meats head over his, you know, like a character at Disney or something. A big plastic ball head around covering his whole face, so you can't even tell it's a human being under there. He might be the thing come to life, and he's got the big chainsaw, and he's coming after you, and chases you out of the zone. So that's when that was the end of Leave It To Cleaver. So it's quite lovely. I also must point out, in the Q videos, it is Mike Aiello playing Samuel Meats. It wasn't him in the house, unfortunately, but you know, he couldn't get around there. Now, as I said, it was an original house. It's a lovely concept. The whole thing is quite spectacular. Loved it very much. But J. Michael Roddy, who at the time was the showrunner of horror, this was his last year, by the way, he said that some of the original things nevertheless were based on horror films, and he mentioned specific inspirations. So he mentioned, although Leave It To Cleaver isn't a specific film, it was inspired by, apparently, an Italian horror film called Pieces, which I've seen, and I don't quite see how that matches up at all. I'm not quite sure. Maybe it's somehow in the spirit of it. But another film he mentioned, which does fit, and that was a film called Parents, which is a Bob Balaban film from the 80s, which also is very much a parody of that sort of situation comedy genre, where everything could be solved in just 30 minutes. And nothing bad ever happens, but underneath was a secret about cannibalism. And it does actually fit the concepts of the house much more. Parenthood, I recommend that one. So it does have that to some degree. Right. So the other original house was called The Spawning, and it was located in Sprung Tent number 2. That's the one that had Insidious last year. And interesting house. It basically is also set in Cary, Ohio, and the Wyandotte County Waterworks, water department building. They had a facade for that. And you go into that house and you find an office, and there's some interesting clues on the desk. There's a little bit of there's a reference to the X-Files. I think there's a book relating to the X-Files and some of that drug that was used in Nightmare on Elm Street house a couple of years before. But not that it's a nightmare of that sort. But remember I talked about things under the surface in Cary, Ohio. Well, in this house, very literally, it's all about what's actually under the surface of Cary, Ohio, because you go down into the sewers of Cary, Ohio, where there's something rather horrible, a sort of amphibious frog, fish, lizard, human hybrid creature, which they called skelders. And that's a direct homage to the X-Files. You remember the Fluke Man in one of the very early episodes? Might have been an inspiration, not directly adapted, but might have been an inspiration for these creatures. Another inspiration was likely Chud, cannibalistic human underground dwellers. But again, these are just inspirations, not direct adaptations. And these sort of amphibious, rather almost Lovecraftian creatures, sort of like deep ones, with they had glowing eyes and webbed hands and rather horrific, were in the sewers underneath the water department of Cary, Ohio. And there's not much more to say about the house because it was pretty much just all them in the various chambers and tunnels. There were eggs. There was an egg chamber, glowing things, lots of wet and damp. But it was one of the least houses of the year in some ways because it was pretty repetitive. What's interesting though, I liked it myself, but it wasn't so well received by the majority of the fans. But I noticed something right away. The floor plan of the house was identical to Dead Exposure had been the year before. You know, and even to the point of you go in this corridor and there's a skelter pop out, see, it's exactly where there was a zombie pop out there, and you realize it's the same sets. They just redesigned them and turned them into sewers. They managed to do that for 3 years running, actually, because Havoc had the same exact floor plan as well. So you saw that. You know, the 3 tubes, that one room with the tubes in the walls. I mean, it just automatically went from year to year, and you had that. They just sort of redesigned the same structure every year. And I thought that was interesting. I guess it saved some money, but in some ways, so it wasn't too bad. But I like the Skelders, I like the house, but again, you know, it was pretty much all it was you know, that's... So I actually got 2 houses done, even though I only sort of touched on one a bit because there wasn't much to say. Alrighty, so the next video will be my starting in on the scare zones.